My mother-in-law called it trashy. My sister-in-law called it desperate. And I almost let them convince me they were right. My name is Claire, and 14 months ago, I made a decision about my wedding that split my entire family down the middle. Half of them stood beside me. The other half laughed at me. Loudly, publicly, and in front of people I had known my whole life. What happened next wasn't something I planned. It wasn't something I engineered or hoped for. It simply unfolded the way things do when people show you exactly who they are. I want to tell you the whole story. Because I think if you've ever been made to feel small for choosing love over appearances, you'll understand every single word of it. My grandmother, Ruth, raised me in a way my own mother never quite managed. My parents divorced when I was 6, and for the next 12 years it was Ruth's kitchen I came home to after school, Ruth's voice on the phone when I had a bad day, and Ruth's hands braiding my hair before every school photo. She was the kind of woman who remembered the name of every person she had ever met, who kept birthday cards for 30 years, and who made the best lemon pound cake in 3 counties without ever using a recipe. When I was 22, Ruth was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. By the time I met my husband Daniel 2 years later, she had moved into Meadowbrook, an assisted living facility about 40 minutes from the city where Daniel and I both worked. I visited her every week without fail, sometimes twice. She knew Daniel's name before she ever met him in person because I talked about him so much during our visits. Daniel proposed to me on a Tuesday evening in March. Nothing elaborate, just the two of us in the kitchen of our apartment, pasta boiling on the stove, and him getting down on one knee with his grandmother's ring and a look on his face so earnest it made me cry before he even finished the question. I said yes before he got to the second sentence. The first person I called was Ruth. She cried. I cried. Daniel stood in the background pretending not to cry and failing completely. The planning began almost immediately, and with it came the opinions. Daniel's family is large and loud and genuinely warm in most ways, but his mother, Patricia, and his older sister, Vanessa, operated on a social frequency I had never quite learned to tune into. Patricia had been a real estate agent for 30 years and measured most things in terms of how they looked. Vanessa had gotten married at a country club 4 years prior and still referenced her wedding the way people reference a personal best in a marathon. They were not unkind women, but they had a particular idea of what a wedding was supposed to be, and it did not leave much room for deviation. The trouble started about 3 months into planning. Ruth's Parkinson's had progressed faster than her doctors anticipated. By early summer, she was using a wheelchair full-time, and her neurologist had told us gently but plainly that travel to any venue more than a short distance from Meadowbrook would be extremely difficult and potentially dangerous for her. Her balance was poor. She fatigued quickly, the kind of stimulation that came with a large event in an unfamiliar place. The noise, the movement, the unpredictable schedule was the kind of thing her care team strongly advised against. I sat with this information for about a week before I said anything to Daniel. I already knew what I wanted to do. I think I knew the moment the doctor said it, but I needed to find the words, and I needed to be sure I wasn't asking for something that wasn't fair to ask. One evening, I told Daniel what I was thinking. That maybe we should move the wedding to Meadowbrook. That the venue we had booked was beautiful, yes, but that Ruth being there, fully there, comfortable and safe and present, mattered more to me than any ballroom. Daniel didn't hesitate. He said, if that's what keeps Grandma Ruth there, then that's what we do. I want to be clear about that. He said it simply, without drama, without making it a sacrifice. He just said it like it was obvious. That is the man I married. Patricia found out on a Sunday afternoon. We had driven out to their house for a casual lunch, and I told her what we were thinking, that we were looking into whether Meadowbrook had a space that could accommodate a ceremony, that we wanted Ruth to be comfortable, that the guest list would need to be adjusted, but that we felt it was the right call. Patricia set down her glass. You want to get married at the nursing home, she said. It wasn't a question, it was the tone you use when you're confirming something you hope you misheard. It's an assisted living facility, I said. And yes, we're exploring it. Claire. She folded her hands on the table. I understand you love Ruth, we all do. But there are other options. Ruth could watch via video call. You could visit her the next day in your dress. These things are done. I know they're done, I said. I don't want to do them. Vanessa was there too, leaning against the kitchen door frame with a glass of iced tea. She laughed, short and sharp. People are going to think you couldn't afford a real venue. Vanessa, Daniel said quietly. I'm serious, she said. I'm not trying to be mean, I'm trying to save you the embarrassment. People talk. Your co-workers are going to be there. Daniel's clients. Do you really want them walking into She paused and gestured vaguely. A facility, with the smell and the linoleum and the... That's enough, Daniel said. But the words were already out. I drove home that evening with a tight feeling in my chest that I recognized immediately. It was the feeling of being made to doubt something I knew was right. I didn't sleep well that night. But in the morning, I called Meadowbrook. It turned out they had a garden courtyard. A large one, with a covered pergola and string lights and flower beds along the edges. The activities coordinator, a woman named Miss Brotles, Delgado told me they had hosted small ceremonies before. Nothing as large as what we were planning, but that she thought it could be done. She was enthusiastic in a way that surprised me. She said the residents always loved when families brought something celebratory into the space. We went to see it on a Thursday afternoon. Ruth came outside in her wheelchair and we sat in the courtyard together, and I told her what we were thinking. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she took my hand in both of hers, her grip still strong even when everything else had slowed, and she said, "Don't do it for me if it costs you something." "It doesn't cost me anything," I said. "It gives me everything." She held my hand for a long time after that. We booked the courtyard that week. We scaled the guest list down from 140 to 68. We moved the reception to a restaurant nearby for the guests who wanted to continue the evening. We redesigned almost everything. Patricia called twice to try to change my mind. I listened both times, thanked her, and told her the decision was made. Vanessa didn't call. She went quiet in a way that felt like stored energy. I didn't know yet what she was storing it for. The morning of the wedding was cool and clear, the kind of late September day that feels like the world dressed up specifically for the occasion. My best friend and maid of honor Jessie had stayed with me the night before, and we woke up early and got ready in the small family lounge that Meadowbrook had reserved for us. The staff had put out fresh flowers in the room without being asked. Someone had tied a small ribbon on Ruth's door. These are the details I will remember for the rest of my life. Daniel arrived with his groomsmen around 10. He was not supposed to see me before the ceremony, and he honored that, but he sent a note in through Jessie that said, simply, "Today you're going to make your grandmother the happiest person in that courtyard. I love you." I kept it folded in my bouquet the whole day. The ceremony was set for 11. Patricia came. I will give her that. She sat in the front row in a dress that was clearly chosen to signal she was not at a nursing home. Structured, formal, slightly overdressed for the setting. But she came, and she did not make a scene. She cried a little during the vows, which surprised me. Vanessa had confirmed she would attend. Her seat was empty. I noticed it. I chose not to dwell on it. The Meadowbrook staff had brought several of the residents out to the courtyard edges, those who wanted to watch, seated in wheelchairs or garden chairs in a loose semicircle at the back. Nobody had been asked to do this. Miss Forte, Delgado told me afterward that the residents had been asking since Tuesday what was happening in the courtyard Saturday morning. They had wanted to come. There was a man named Harold in the second row who I had never met before that day. He was wearing a button-down shirt with a bolo tie. When I walked down the aisle, down a path of white petals that Jessie and Ms. Delgado had laid out at 7 that morning, Harold started clapping. Just Harold. Slow, deliberate, proud clapping, like I was his own. And then the rest of the residents joined in. And then the guests. And by the time I reached Daniel, I was laughing and crying at the same time, and my mascara was already gone, and I did not care even slightly. Daniel was crying too. He wasn't hiding it this time. We wrote our own vows. Daniel's were short and specific and devastatingly sincere. Mine were longer because I have always needed more words to say the same things. Ruth sat in the front left, directly where she could see both of our faces, and she watched every second of it with an expression I have tried to describe to people and never quite managed. Pride, yes. Love, yes. But something else too. A kind of peaceful fullness, like a person who has arrived somewhere they weren't sure they'd make it to. When the officiant said we were married and Daniel kissed me, Ruth said, clearly enough that the first 3 rows heard it, "There, that's done right." The guests laughed. Harold clapped again. Several of the staff members who had gathered by the doors were wiping their eyes. I went to Ruth immediately after, before photos, before anything. I knelt down next to her wheelchair and she held my face in both hands. She said, "I'm so glad I didn't miss this." I said, "I would never have let you miss this." The rest of the day was warm and easy. The restaurant reception was genuinely fun. The reduced guest list meant that everyone there was actually someone we wanted there. And the table conversations were real in a way that large wedding small talk rarely is. Patricia loosened up over dinner. She told me, once, quietly, while Daniel was giving a toast, that the ceremony had been lovely. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I didn't hear from Vanessa until the following week. She sent me a message, not a call, a message that said she was sorry she hadn't been able to make it and that she hoped the day had been nice. It had the specific flatness of a text written by someone who is not sorry and knows it, set mostly to establish a paper trail of politeness. I responded briefly and moved on. What I didn't know was that Vanessa, 3 days after the wedding, had posted something. Jessie found it. She texted me a screenshot without commentary and let me read it myself. Vanessa had posted on her personal Facebook to a few hundred friends and family members. I won't reproduce it word for word. What it said, in summary, was that she had skipped the nursing home wedding of her brother and his wife, that she found it sad that some people couldn't even be bothered to plan a real celebration, that she had nothing against elderly people but that there was something uncomfortable about turning a nursing home into a wedding venue and that she genuinely felt embarrassed for them. She had not made it private. She had tagged Daniel's name. I read it twice. I felt my face go hot. Then I set my phone down and made a cup of coffee and thought carefully about what I wanted to do. What I decided was nothing. I didn't respond to the post. I didn't text Vanessa. I didn't ask Daniel to intervene, though he found out about it an hour later and was quietly furious in the contained way he gets furious, which is somehow worse than loud anger. I told him to let it be. He agreed, reluctantly. But here's the thing about publicly posting something like that: other people can see it. And people did. Daniel's cousin, a woman I had always liked, commented first. She wrote that she had been at the wedding and that it was one of the most beautiful ceremonies she had ever attended in her life. Then an aunt commented. Then a family friend who knew Ruth. Then a former co-worker of Daniel's who had heard about the wedding secondhand and had nothing to do with any of us. By the end of the second day, the post had dozens of comments, nearly all of them in direct disagreement with Vanessa. Some were gentle, some were not. A few people who knew Ruth specifically said things that were pointed enough that I felt almost uncomfortable reading them, and they were on my side. Vanessa deleted the post on the 3rd day. Then she texted me. It was a longer message this time. It said that she felt the reaction online had been unfair, that people had misunderstood what she meant, and that she hoped I understood she had never meant any real disrespect to Ruth. She asked if I could talk to some of the people who had commented and explain that it had been taken out of context. I read it 3 times. I thought about the word trashy. I thought about the word desperate. I thought about Jessie laying white petals at 7 in the morning. I thought about Harold in his bolo tie clapping for a bride he had never met. I thought about Ruth's hands on my face. Then I typed back, "I hope things settle down for you soon." And I left it there. 6 weeks after the wedding, Ruth caught a respiratory infection. At her age and with her condition, infections moved quickly, and this one did. She was moved to a higher level of care within the facility. Daniel and I visited every evening. Some evenings, she was alert and talkative, remembering everything, asking about our apartment and whether we had gotten the rug we had been debating. Other evenings, she was tired, and we just sat with her and watched old game shows on the television mounted in the corner. On a Wednesday evening in mid-November, I was sitting with her while Daniel got coffee from the machine down the hall. Ruth was looking out the window at the parking lot, which was not scenic, but she seemed to find it peaceful. She turned to me and said out of nowhere, "That was a good day." I knew immediately what she meant. "It was the best day," I said. She nodded slowly. "That young man of yours." "I know," I said. "You hold on to that," she said. "That's the whole thing, right there." She passed away 11 days later, on a Thursday morning just after sunrise. She was 81 years old. She had eaten lemon pound cake at our wedding reception because I had specifically arranged for it and watched her eat 2 slices. She did not miss it. I have thought a lot since then about why the reaction to Vanessa's post was so swift and so decisive. I think it's because most people, somewhere underneath the noise of how things are supposed to look, understand what really matters. They've had a Ruth in their lives, or they've lost one, or they're afraid of missing something they can't get back. And when they see someone called that choice embarrassing, something in them recognizes the wrongness of it immediately. The wedding at Meadowbrook was not what anyone would have put on an inspiration board. There was no sweeping staircase, no crystal chandelier, no string quartet. There was a covered pergola and string lights and flower beds and 68 people who genuinely wanted to be there and a row of residents in wheelchairs who clapped when I walked by. It was exactly what a wedding is supposed to be. Patricia called me last spring. Out of the blue, a Sunday afternoon. She asked how I was doing, how Daniel was, whether he had thought about the holidays. And then, near the end of the call, she said, slowly, like someone saying something they rehearsed, "I want you to know that I think what you did for Ruth was a good thing." I wasn't gracious about it. I should have been. I told her I appreciated her saying so, and I meant it. Some things come around when you give them time. Some people need to see how a story ends before they understand what it was about. I don't have any anger left about it. What I have is the memory of Ruth's face during the vows, and Harold's bolo tie, and Daniel's note folded in my bouquet, and those 2 slices of lemon pound cake. I have more than enough.